presiding official for this special occasion in this very special place. In the months that preceded his death, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who visited Tougaloo's campus during the height of the Civil Rights Movement, penned a timeless piece entitled The World House. Inspired by a renowned novelist, King wrote these words: "One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change." For 150 years, Tougaloo College has remained awake through periods of change. The program will begin with greetings. First of all, we'll begin with our opening invocation by Chaplain Maxine Bolden, and we will be followed by a musical selection by Ms. Coran Hughes, and greetings from our 2019 and 2020 Miss Tougaloo and Mr. Tougaloo, Ms. Mallory Greer and Mr. Houston Sneed. We will begin with the opening invocation by Chaplain Bolden and Mr. and Ms. Tougaloo, respectively.
Let us pray. Couldn't hear nobody pray. Couldn't hear nobody pray. Way down yonder by myself. Couldn't hear nobody pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on this way, Thou who by Thy might has led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. God, we thank You for this opportunity to come together, that we might be gathered as one people in one place under one God. Thank You for the grace and the mercy that brings us to this place. We now invite Your presence. We welcome You to sit among us, to be with us in our conversation, in our fellowship, and our sharing. We invite You to rest on the speaker and on all the participants, that all that we do this afternoon will bring You glory. We continue to pray blessings over our president and over all of those who are in leadership and service in this place, that as we're empowered and equipped to go forward to serve Your people, all that we do with our hands, our feet, our minds, our voices, and our hearts will bring You glory and give grace to Your people. We pray this with one voice, but many hearts together, and we say in agreement, Amen, 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 and Ashe.
Greetings, I am Mallory Greer, your 81st Miss Tougaloo College.
And I am Houston G. Sneed, your 19th Mr. Tougaloo College. And it gives us great pleasure to welcome you to the 2019 Presidential Lecture on the historic campus of Tougaloo College.
For 150 years, our beloved Eagle Queen has served as an oasis for those who seek knowledge, those who believe in being of service to others, and those who endeavor to effect positive change. For 150 years, Tougaloo College has transformed lives and changed the world.
This afternoon, we pause to reflect on this institution's 150-year commitment to social justice, and we are honored to have you here. On behalf of the entire Tougaloo College family, thank you.
The dream of so many who have walked the hallowed grounds of our dear Eagle Queen was born out of great sacrifice. In a state where the flag bears the emblem of the Confederacy, Tougaloo College students, faculty, staff, and administrators stood and continue to stand shoulder to shoulder to dismantle Jim Crow, demand a quality education for Mississippi's children, direct studies to prove that health disparities are a reality for people of color and other marginalized communities, and define what Black success can be because of institutions like Tougaloo College. We must not forget those sacrifices and efforts, and we must remain awake. On this day, we celebrate 150 years of social justice, and we welcome home a daughter of the Mississippi soil and true Tougalooan, attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey, who is joined by her classmates. And at this time, I would like to recognize Ms. Coran Hughes as she offers a selection. Lift every voice and sing. Let's give Ms. Hughes another round of applause. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to call to the podium Mr. Anthony Moore, a senior economics major, pre-law minor, and a member of the Reuben B. Anderson Pre-Law Society, to introduce our speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Anthony Moore.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Moore, and to correct Dr. Chamberlain, I am a junior economics major, and I am also a pre-law minor. And in addition, I am a member of the Reuben B. Anderson Pre-Law Society here at Tougaloo College. It is a great pleasure to be able to attend the presidential lecture, and it is a great honor to be able to introduce our guest speaker, the Honorable Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey. Tougaloo alum of an outstanding magnitude, Attorney Slaughter Harvey has taken up a prominent space in history, and as such has served to elevate and promote Tougaloo through her very own actions. Originally from Forest, Mississippi, Attorney Slaughter Harvey came to Tougaloo College in the 60s in a quite tumultuous time. At Tougaloo, she served as the first female president on the campus of the SGA, which is the Student Government Association. Groundbreaking in its own right, her becoming president of the SGA was only a precursor to a career of barrier breaking and history making. After leaving Tougaloo College, Attorney Slaughter Harvey went on to attend University of Mississippi. This too was undertaken at a time of great tribulation for young Black students and undoubtedly impacted Attorney Slaughter Harvey greatly. In 1970, she graduated from the University of Mississippi, receiving her Juris Doctorate law degree, and she also, at that very moment, became the first African-American female to receive a law degree from that school. This action alone opened doors, countless doors, for other African-American women in the state to pursue a career in that field. Impressively, within no less than 5 years, Attorney Slaughter had become the first African-American female judge in the state. In doing research and preparation for this introduction, I extensively watched videos and read interviews from our distinguished guests and of our distinguished guests. But what most intrigued and humbled me was her reverence for Tougaloo College. She credited her meeting Medgar Evers for her deciding to change her future career. Serving as an adjunct professor for over 36 years at Tougaloo, she impacted thousands of students that have come through these gates. Her ability to passionately advocate for her beliefs and her strong advocation for marginalized children and African American history has placed her in a prominent space not only in Tougaloo history, but in the national history. Attorney Constance Slaughter has founded and is the president of the Legacy Education and Community Empowerment Foundation. She has also created programs such as the Scott County African American Historical Society. For several decades, Constance Slaughter Harvey has been a fierce leader in the state and exemplary Tougalooan since she first arrived here in the 1960s, then as a pre-science major. Attorney Slaughter Harvey has received more than 600 awards for her outstanding contributions and is a life member of the Girl Scouts of America, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Magnolia Bar Association, National Bar Association, American Bar Association, Mississippi Bar Association, the NAACP, MAP, National Federated Women, and Rotary International. She is the mother of Constance Olivia Slaughter Harvey Burwell, James, and the Noni to her grandson, James Arthur Emmanuel Burwell III. She is a member of the St. Michael Catholic Church. For the past 23 years, she has served as a weekly columnist for the Scott County Times and the Spirit of Morton. Again, it is with great honor that we welcome someone with such prestige, whose career can only be described as thorough, gracious, and committed, the Honorable Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey.
I appreciate your welcome, and I appreciate being here today. It is my honor to be here with you to celebrate 150 years of greatness. I am honored to be here to help blow out the candles on the birthday cake. And I'm more honored to be able to enjoy the ice cream. Let me thank those of you who are here today for your presence. Those of you who know me know that I don't read speeches, that I talk from the Spirit. But there comes a time, President Walters, when you must contain yourselves. And I consider this to be in the same category with making a closing argument to a jury. So I ask you, if you will, to bear with me as I read my thoughts to you. And don't worry, there will be no test, and you don't have to listen. It is most appropriate that we celebrate this special anniversary by recognizing our special legacy gifts, one of which is social justice. Social justice is embedded in the multicolored Tougaloo College quilt, and it's almost synonymous with Tougaloo, especially in this barren desert of injustice and discrimination. Tougaloo University was born out of the flames of social justice and the struggle for freedom and dignity led by Cinque of Sierra Leone. He was subdued along with his fellow warriors and held prisoner until his case for return to his homeland was argued before the United States Supreme Court by former President John Quincy Adams. His case was won, Cinque versus Armstead, and he died at his home mission in Sierra Leone in 1879. 10 years before Cinque's death, his dream came true. Tougaloo University was born on a former slave plantation. The master's mansion, built in 1848, was designed for his young bride, but she changed her mind when she witnessed him being cruel to a slave. The mansion across the yard represents and connects the past, the present, and future of our alma mater. Social justice is the bridge. From that mansion's spirit comes the clarion call for demand of social justice. The spirit permeates the entire campus, including the flowing water from two brooks and the swinging rhythm of the Spanish moss. The mansion was probably on the drawing board when Cinque led his revolt. Now, it's interesting to note that what was once intended for the dehumanization of our race as slave grounds is now a premier institution that has a strong, indomitable spirit for survival and leadership. It also has a spirit for positive changes for everyone's life, regardless of race. The history of Tougaloo University presents a compelling argument for the establishment of a haven of refuge and intellectual and academic challenges for newly freed slaves. Tougaloo University was granted a charter by the Mississippi legislature on May 13, 1871. As it was then, Tougaloo continues to remain an institution of strong commitment to the struggles for freedom and social justice. Cinque's spirit makes the Tougaloo water taste much better. and it remains in the Tougaloo air and greets all who enter with the liberation song. Within the gate, students are encouraged to acquire the skills necessary for liberation, as well as to succeed in a challenging academic arena. The Tougaloo mantra is to seek to serve academically while demanding a continuation of social justice. The clarion call for social justice is entrenched in the water and the moss. Social justice issues are fundamentally woven into all classes here and are a part of the extracurricular world. Once you walk or drive through the gates, you are obligated to include social justice as part of your daily agenda. This very chapel, in this place, has been, is, and will always continue to be a social justice pulpit where many prominent voices have joined in the social justice choir, including Medgar, Ralph Bunche, Martin, Ruby Dee, Fannie Lou, Unita, Aaron, Robert Kennedy, and many, many other social justice activists. And ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed to be here in this anointed place. Allow me to reference personal experiences that inspired me to become a part of the Tougaloo College Eagles and to recognize my responsibility to work toward ensuring social justice to all. As a young girl, my parents nurtured my 5 sisters and me on Tougaloo water and Eagle bread. We were even fed Tougaloo milk with our oatmeal. While I was born at Jeffrey Memorial Hospital on Farish Street, my parents immediately swept me away to their home on what is now Kelly Street in Tougaloo. The street was named in honor of my mother's father, George Asbury Kelly, who taught himself to read and write, yet he claimed Tougaloo as his alma mater. My daddy's grandmother, Anna Battle Hayton, and his mother, Fannie Jane Hayton, received their educational experiences here on this campus. My parents met at Tougaloo. They were married here at Tougaloo. They sent 4 of their 6 daughters to Tougaloo, and they were both memorialized here in this chapel 10 years apart. They are now together in the Tougaloo Cemetery. So you see, Tougaloo is, was, and shall always hold a special reserved place in my heart. This core in my heart has a strong dislike for discrimination, racism, and bigotry, but a real, genuine commitment to social justice. My daughter Constance Olivia and her husband James Burwell graduated from Tougaloo. And I am working diligently to persuade my grandson James III to follow Tougaloo and family traditions, and I ask that you wish me luck. From my parents, I learned of the many qualities at Tougaloo, including the diversity. That Tougaloo was the place where students were introduced to the real cake made from the nub, including humanities, correct English, writing, philosophy, art, and of course, the social justice ingredients. I learned to appreciate the need for social justice at an early age. just by listening to my parents and observing their outrage at the sight of an injustice, discrimination, or other forms of racism. The murder of Emmett Till was the first instance of a miscarriage of justice that attracted my need and my attention for social justice. My daddy was so angry that he almost lost it. And Mama, a gentle person, was visibly shaken. I realized then that I had to carry that baton. When I was accepted to Tougaloo in 1963 and attended the National Science Summer Program under Dr. Elmore Brady, I was so pleased finally to participate in the relevant issue-oriented activities. It was then that I learned firsthand why Mama and Daddy loved Tougaloo. It was an academic environment where social justice was the order of the day, and it was infused in all facets of the Tougaloo College fabric. Medgar Evers was murdered 6 days before my 16th birthday. And it was in this chapel that Carolyn Amerson and I learned of his assassination. Several of us girls were in awe of his handsome looks, but more attracted to his plan for social justice, voter registration, and empowerment by voting to ensure social justice. The connection between Cinque and other founders and Medgar were obvious, even to a first-year Tougaloo College crab. I watched Joan Trumpauer, a Delta, and my cousin Memphis Norman sit in at Woolworth's lunch counter. I watched them tolerate ketchup and sugar being poured over their heads. And I saw Memphis being stomped to a point of bleeding. I saw red blood, even though we had a black and white TV. The pain was just that real. Subsequently, I was hooked on being a part of the change by any legal means necessary. To accomplish this goal, I changed my major from pre-med to pre-law, and thus vowed to participate fully in the social justice crusade. And it was here on this campus, Madam President, and after many experiences, both good and bad, that I defined my own clarion call to accept the baton, to challenge and change the Mississippi legal and political systems. I also learned that there would be obstacles and barriers to address my call. And fellow Tougalooans and guests, I did not realize that some obstacles would come from within the Tougaloo gate. Yet our Maker orders our steps and prepares us for the real battle by involving us in small skirmishes. And so it was. Social justice was still on the agenda, and it took me to the University of Mississippi School of Law. Likewise, many of you in this audience, including my classmates, and I'm going to ask you to stand, if you can get up. Thank you so very much. I thank my classmates for their continued commitment, more than 50 years, and dedication to social justice by holding our systems of government accountable with their voices and with their votes. And the turbulent times of the 60s, to the hosting of James Meredith's March, to the University of Mississippi School of Law, to the medical facilities and institutions in Jackson, Meharry, Howard, Harvard, Brown, to the schools and universities over this state and nation, to the halls of justice and courts of equity and law in Mississippi, to the halls of Congress, and even to the President Barack Obama White House. Tougaloo eaglets and alumni have been and continue to be present in the administration of social justice in their spaces. Tougaloo eagles and eaglets have contributed volumes to the struggle for continuation of social justice. And because of the Tougaloo mandate to work to ensure social justice, the descendants of the Eagle Queen continue to fly high and higher and return to the Eagle's Nest to report on the progress made in ensuring social justice. That progress is then shared with you, young eaglets, those of you who reside within the Tougaloo Gate. Ladies and gentlemen, what is our challenge as Tougaloo supporters to continue the social agenda? What do we do? I submit that Tougaloo eaglets should continue to persevere by preparing our children and their children, by sharing the rich history and legacy of social justice within this gate. We must work for the common good and vow to continue to address the social justice agenda, even if it means, as First Lady Michelle Obama said, taking the high road when they go low. We must continue even in the face of bullying leadership from Washington and Jackson, and even the recent ICE raids that were designed to affect recent elections. We are the conscience of social justice here in this state, and we must not acquiesce to the arbitrary injustices and discrimination inflicted on others. That's the Tougaloo spirit. That's social justice. Our challenge, fellow eaglets, is to continue to forge ahead to ensure social justice in all facets of life in this global society, to continue to make a difference, and above all, continue to keep the faith. I challenge you, each of you, to purchase or check out a copy of Mississippi, The View from Tougaloo by Clarice Campbell and Oscar Rogers. I guarantee you it's worth the investment, because the agenda of action for social justice is set forth in these pages. In closing, allow me to reference the remarks and advice of one of my sorors, a beloved librarian here at Tougaloo, the late Virgia Brock Shedd. She shared these words during the 122nd anniversary of the Eagle Queen. Quote, "As we face the future during these difficult times, the strength needed for the task of continuing to fight and demand social justice shall come from this blessed place called Tougaloo. So let us lift every voice, and let us sing, and let us march, and continue until social justice is guaranteed to all of us. Sinkay and our foreparents prepared us for this fight, and we stand on their shoulders. Our children and their children deserve it, because, sisters and brothers, we are all that they have. May God's blessings continue to be with you, your family, the Tougaloo family, and all who love freedom and work for social justice. Thank you.
Let us give our speaker another round of applause. Before we take questions and answers, questions from the floor, I would like to recognize a few people in the audience, and they don't know that I'm taking a point of privilege, Mr. Bradford. I see civil rights veterans and people who shoulders I stand on, and students, these are people whose shoulders you stand on. So, Mr. Sammy Bradford, a member of the Tougaloo Nine, if you would please stand. In 2021, we will celebrate 60 years since March 27th, 1961. So I wanted to take this opportunity to recognize you. Dr. John Garner. So for you Kenshlow kids, Dr. Garner is someone very important and somebody who's been very special to me through the years. And I know that there are others in the audience, if my glasses aren't as good as they used to be, but if anyone who was active in the movement or Tougaloo alumni from the civil rights era, if you would please stand so we can recognize you all as well. No, Professor Dick Johnson, Dr. Walter Davis, thank you all, and again, thank you, Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey. We might be related. We might be related. We'll have to talk. But at this moment, we will take questions from the audience. Please raise your hands to be recognized, and I will call upon you. And Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey will return to the mic to answer your question. We have Dr. Charles Holmes.
Dr. Holmes. I'll talk loud. I first met Constance in 1965, right, Constance?
That's right.
As a pre-law advisor. As a pre-law advisor?
Yeah, you're right.
I sang the hymn to the Deltas right over there, Callaway. Probably 1954. Tomorrow, thanks to Professor Miller, we'll be escorting some students, pre-law students, to Atlanta.
Wonderful.
Right. Put yourself in the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior pre-law students. And right now, I will be advising, I'm trying to advise some students. But I want them to make an informed choice. You know what I mean? After 53 years of pre-law advisor, allow me to help you make an informed choice. From Yale Law School, #1 in the country used to be, to the one that was just admitted online. Just help, what would you advise some of those pre-law students right now?
Thank you, sir, and let me commend you on your dedication to students who want to pursue the field of law. You've done that at Tougaloo and you did it at Jackson State, and I want to express my appreciation to you. I started teaching at Tougaloo in August of 1970, and Norset Stewart, who's a Tougaloo graduate, and I vowed that we would come back to Tougaloo and teach Tougaloo students how to prepare to be lawyers, because no one prepared us. And what I told the students then is to, first of all, ask yourselves if you are committed for the long haul. Or do you just want to do it to see if you can do it? If you're committed for the long haul and you have a desire within to make changes, be it in boardrooms, in the field, in the courthouses, then do it. But if you're not committed for the long haul, you're just playing. I always stressed to my students that you must know how to write. And that's critical. And how to think on your feet. I work with young people now. We have a mentoring program in the public schools, boys and girls. And two of the things that we require is we require whenever you talk, you stand up. And we require that you learn to write at least your name in cursive writing. And you'd be surprised at the number of young people who don't know how to write their names in cursive. You would be saddened to know the number of young people who cannot spell their last name. So they happen to be the victims of this system that we live in. That's why it's important that we continue to push for social justice. So those are two things that I would advocate. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm attorney Julian Miller.
Yes, sir.
I am the new interim pre-law director of the Ruby V. Anderson pre-law program. I've been here 7.5 months, so I'm like a poor man's version of this man. But I'm trying. I wanted to sort of jump ahead a little bit. We had, for our inaugural pre-law society meeting, we had Justice Anderson speak, and he sort of talked about, kind of touched on his transition from Ole Miss Law School to actual practice. You know, he was a very dynamic civil rights litigator. He was kind of thrown in the fire. And I'm a 2013 graduate of Ole Miss Law, and he literally has sued every school district in the state, and I'm doing that as part of my pro bono practice now. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on with you, sort of talk about your transition from from Ole Miss Law as literally the only African American female law school graduate from Ole Miss Law, and sort of talk about your transition into the civil rights practice, and how it's really unprecedented at this time to get that level of experience from transition from law school into practice is really unheard of. And so if you kind of touch on that and talk about some of your most significant cases and how you sort of adapted in making that transition from graduate to practicing civil rights litigator.
I'm not sure I made the transition. I probably was still in it. But I don't call the University of Mississippi Ole Miss because it is repulsive. And I've said that over and over and over again. That was part of my problem in surviving with the same man at the university. When you think about the university and the reference to Ole Miss, that's really what it is. A plantation that required the slaves to call the slave owner's wife O Miss and call him O Massa. And when I tell young people with the Black Law Student Association there, I tell young folks that you can call it Ole Miss because you don't really know what you're saying. But for me to call it Ole Miss, it's going to be very difficult. But sometimes you have to call it what it is. And at this point in time, it probably is Ole Miss. But we shall see what we shall see. When I graduated from the university in 1970, January 1970, I was supposed to go back to march. I didn't march here at Tougaloo, and I didn't march at the university. The reason I didn't march at the university is because I was busy filing lawsuits, including one where he's a highway patrolman. I think he's retired, but I still need to call him Trooper. R.O. Williams was one of the very first African-American highway patrolmen in the state of Mississippi. I didn't want to march from that place. Please give him a round of applause. And I want to give you a side note. I had never gotten a ticket in my life until I was stopped by a black highway patrolman. And the funny thing about it is he was kind of nasty just a little bit, and I was not cooperative at all. And he told me, well, lady, the best thing for you to do is get you a lawyer. And I laughed. He thought I was losing my mind. I laughed because I said, he must be out of his mind. And it happened that that same highway patrolman came to our home on Christmas Eve for a party. I won't go into what happened. But I think the transition, and I always say this, I do believe that I was under a spell when I got out, because I did things then that when I think about it, I get nervous. And with the highway patrol, when I think of the things that I did back then, I thank my mama for keeping my connections with God. You know, because young people, you're going to do some foolish things. But let me tell you, do them. When you feel compelled to make certain that social justice is a reality, do it. Now, when you reach my age, you're going to sit back and say, Lord, have mercy. But it's good to be able to say that, and having seen what you have invested in to ensure the continuation of social justice. So follow your hearts. And above all, be prepared. I'm generally criticized for being a perfectionist. But you know what? If I had not been, I wouldn't have made it. My daddy taught me two things. He taught me about social justice, but he also taught me to be thorough. He was one of my teachers in school. And I was smart. I knew I was smart. You know, I had to be smart. And we took a test. And I knew all the answers. And I got my paper back. And I had 98. And this girl, who I know was not smart, had 100. And I was visibly shaken. I was angry. And I was getting ready to question my daddy, but I knew just so far you can go in class. But I asked him that night, I got all the answers. Why did you give me a 98? And he said, you forgot to cross your T and dot your I. That taught me a lesson. Nobody can ever say that I passed in a paper that looked like an L for a T or an I for an E. So give the best that you have, and if you're not, don't do it at all. Did I answer your question, sir? Any other questions?
Of all of the litigation that you've done in the courtrooms, federal as well as state court, in your mind, what stands out as the most important one? And all of them were important, but the most important one to you, that you could probably still see the full reaches of the benefits? Thank you.
I'd say that the one that stands out in my mind insofar as the impact is Marr versus Crystal, the Highway Patrol case. Because the Highway Patrol represented the Ku Klux Klan back then, and we all know it. Even the gray uniforms that they wear now, same color the Klan. The good thing is that we now have a black chief, and he's black. You know, when I say black, he's black. That to me, no, I mean, you know, a lot of folks are black, but they think white. Yeah, this guy is black and he thinks black. Now he knows what he's talking about. I think that probably was the most significant. The one that was most painful was the Jackson State case when 2 students were murdered by highway patrolmen and Jackson police officers, National Guard. And the scenario behind why that happened, that is still very painful. The trial was probably one of the most devastating trials I've ever witnessed and participated in. And it's just recently that I can openly talk about it. It was awful. And then recently, the last case I had was a lawsuit against one of the hospitals here, a black woman, 64 years old, who was overweight, who was diabetic, had high blood pressure. And the doctors kept her in intensive care for 64 days and denied that there was any wrongdoing on their part. I argued that case before a Tougaloo graduate, the Honorable Tommy Green. And the jury, not Judge Green, the jury returned a verdict for her family. And I think that's one that tore my heart because we had to try that case twice. And her children had to endure that agony twice. So those 3 cases will forever be in my heart. And advice to young lawyers, never get personally involved in your client's case. It's the worst thing you can do is get personally involved. No more questions, I don't mean to intimidate anybody, but yes, sir.
Could you just speak about your experience as being a columnist, like a column for the newspaper?
My experience as a columnist? Yes. My mother started writing for the Scott County Times in 1988. She was the first African American to write for a paper. And the editor of the paper at that time was Sid Salter. Anybody familiar with Sid Salter? Sid and I argued every day. But I respect Sid so very much because what he tells you is what you will get. And if he disagrees with you, he's going to let you know. He's not one that'll say this and then get over here. So Sid convinced my mother to write for the Scott County Times, and I tried to convince her not to because it was a waste of time. Because nobody cares who went where and ate and what they wore and all of that. But Mama did it. When my mother was on her dying bed, she asked me to do 3 things. One was to be a sister to my sisters instead of a lawyer. The second was to go back to church, which I did because I was scared not to. And the third one was to please keep the column alive. So I had no choice. And I have been writing for the Scott County Times since then. I enjoy it now because it gives the entire community, black, white, and Hispanic, an opportunity to see that young children, black and white and Hispanic, can do certain things other than commit crimes. And young folks are delighted when you put their names in the paper for making the principal's list or the superintendent's list. So I'm getting to the point now where I'm enjoying it, and I don't get paid, so that's another negative. Thank you so very much.
We thank you all for your thoughtful questions and also participation, and thank you for those answers. As we move through the rest of this week's 150th Founders Week, we must not forget that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. We are those 60-something enslaved people on the Bodie plantations' wildest dreams. Tougaloo College has been an incubator for servant leadership and has birthed some of the greatest freedom fighters for black rights, some of the loudest voices for workers' rights, and some of the truest advocates for human rights. And at this time, the program will shift gears to recognize the scholar activists who challenged and transformed Mississippi for the better. At this time, I call to the podium Dr. Steve Rothman, Professor of Political Science, and also Director of the Modern Day Slavery Project here at Tougaloo College, to introduce our special guest and friend of Tougaloo College, Dr. Rothman.
Thank you, Dr. Chamberlain. This is like old home week for me, because when I came here in 1972, two of my colleagues and close friends were Connie Slaughter and Jim Lowen, so that's really great. And to see Dick Johnson and John Garner, people that I've taught with in the early days, that really hits my heart. It's an extreme pleasure for me to introduce today's honoree, my friend and former colleague, Jim Lowen. I met Jim 47 years ago in 1972, but Jim came to Tougaloo in 1968, served in several capacities during his tenure. He immersed himself in the Tougaloo culture and was a vital part of the Tougaloo experience. After Tougaloo solidified its place as a hotbed for civil rights activism, Jim, through his scholarship, challenged the status quo, advocating for truth in text. His 1974 book, Mississippi Conflict and Change, was a highly disputed but truthful text that for the first time ever forced the telling of an inclusive narrative of Mississippi's history. His textbook was met with such resistance by state officials that a federal district court ruled that the rejection of the textbook abridged rights to academic freedom under the First Amendment and to the fundamental interest in maintaining a free and open education system that provides for the acquisition of useful knowledge. Jim went on to join the faculty at the University of Vermont. He's the author of Lies My Teacher Told Me and Lies Across America, among other books. And Jim reminds me that Lies Across America and his other books, as far as all living sociologists are concerned, he has sold more books than any of them. So that's a tremendous achievement. He's been an expert witness or consultant in more than 50 class action lawsuits, mostly on civil rights, voting rights, employment discrimination, and education. And his 2006 book, Sundown Towns, tells how thousands of communities in America excluded Africans, Chinese, Jewish, or Native Americans between 1890 and 1970, how some still exist. That hits home. I grew up in Minneapolis. I'm Jewish, and I never realized that Edina was off limits. The suburb of Edina was off limits to Jews. I found out reading Jim's book. Jim has been a true scholar activist and a catalyst for change in this state and in this country. I'm delighted that Tougaloo College is honoring him during this 150th year celebration. Please welcome my friend Jim Lowen as he joins President Carmen J. Walters for a special signing ceremony. Yeah.
It's great to be here. I've been in this chapel so many times and heard other famous, much more famous people speak here, sing here, participate here, and I'm really honored to be up here. I'm going to give you a brief history of me and Tougaloo. I first heard of Tougaloo, it's not too well known in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, when I became a student for the winter semester at Mississippi State University in 1963. I call that my junior year abroad. Well, at the time, that was 1963. Mississippi was doing what it could to be separate from the United States. Some people at Mississippi State told me with pride, some people told me with shame, that Mississippi State was then the largest segregated all-white institution of higher education outside of South Africa, okay? That's why I went there. I was a sociologist. I'd grown up in the Midwest. I was going to college in the Midwest. I didn't think that was competent, right? I needed to know something about more of the country than just the Midwest. So I was at Mississippi State, and the only famous professor of sociology in the Deep South, really, but certainly in Mississippi, was Ernst Berinsky at Tougaloo. And so naturally, the sociologists at Mississippi State said, well, you've got to go meet him. And so I wrote a letter to him. And so I was a student here for 4 days in, I think, February of 1963. Okay? I fell in love with Tougaloo, and I'll tell you why. It had to do with Tougaloo's difference from Mississippi State. I was going to Carleton College, a very intellectual school in the upper Midwest, near Minneapolis. Where is he? In fact, Tougaloo was, Carleton was maybe too intellectual, I don't know, but it certainly was intellectual. And Mississippi State, particularly back then, was the exact opposite, okay? And I want to say that was not just my impression. I'm a sociologist. We count things. And so I counted all of the books owned by every student in my dormitory floor at Mississippi State, not counting required textbooks. I even counted comic books, okay? But not required textbooks. There were 23 students, plus me, right? I didn't include me, naturally. And so I counted all the books they owned. They owned 51 books, okay? One student owned 41. He was an intellectual, okay? One student owned 5. A couple of students owned a couple of books, okay? And that was it. The vast majority had never owned a book that was not a required textbook in their lives. I'm sure they didn't have any at home either. I loved them dearly, but they were not my people. I came to Tougaloo. I had 4 roommates in Judson Cross. Judson Cross used to be the male dormitory. Some of you know that. One of my roommates was on exchange at Oberlin. That's how come I had a bed there. But his stuff was there, so I counted his books, okay? My 4 roommates, therefore, had 48 books, not counting required textbooks. Each of them owned about 12, okay? Now, if you consider, there's what we call the mode, that is the most common single number. There's a measure of kind of a form of average. The average at Mississippi State was 0, and the average at Tougaloo was 12. That's a difference between night and day, okay? And so I love Tougaloo for that, and I also loved its commitment to social justice, which, shall we say, there was none of at Mississippi State, okay? So I resolved to stay in touch with Tougaloo. In 1965, I got Professor Berinsky to appoint me to run, some of you will understand the reason I pronounce it this way, to run the lab, the social science lab that he operated, including the Social Science Forum speaker series, which was the only speaker series in Mississippi that black folks and white folks could go to and could exchange views frankly and without fear. And while Dr. Berinsky spent the summer at other institutions trying to stay in touch with national sociology. And then in 1967, I wrote my dissertation in the Delta, so I spent the 7 months in the Delta, and I used, it just for the record, it's still in print, it's called the Mississippi Chinese, Between Black and White. I had learned that there were Chinese people at all-white Mississippi State, and that's how I came to get involved in that subject for my dissertation. But I used Tougaloo for R&R. You understand what I'm saying? That is rest and recreation, because it was about the only place, again, that you could come to and kind of relax. And of course, it played that role. It has played that role in the civil rights movement throughout. Well, in 1968, I persuaded Tougaloo, well, they were happy, but I persuaded them to hire me after I got my PhD, and I taught here from 68 to 75. And I want to just say about that Tougaloo played an important role in my education, because teachers learn stuff too. You know, we're not just teaching stuff. And I learned a lot from my students and from other faculty members. And then since 1975, well, I went to the University of Vermont, as Steve mentioned. I claim that I taught at the blackest and the whitest schools in America, okay? Now, of course, the University of Vermont did have white students, and in fact, one semester I actually had her in class. That was a joke. Don't sit there taking notes. We had more than one. This is a tough crowd. But while I was at Tougaloo between 68 and 75, I got involved as an expert witness for various civil rights lawyers. And in fact, I have my own story kind of like yours. I was an expert witness in the Mississippi Highway Patrol case. I did a report for that. And then in 1969, I think, or maybe 70, I was driving in the Delta, and I got pulled over by a black highway patrolman. And I lived at the time on Tougaloo College campus. I didn't have on my driver's license, was expert witness in getting you your job. But it didn't do me any good. He gave me a ticket anyway. So I was speeding. I have to admit I was speeding. Anyway, then, as you mentioned, I got involved in writing this textbook about Mississippi history. There's a Tougaloo story behind that, but I won't tell it right now. Let's just say I do write it. It's in my book, Teaching What Really Happened. It leads off my book, Teaching What Really Happened, because my students at Tougaloo, my first-year students, in 1968-69, my very first year as a full-time faculty member here, my students showed me that they had been completely misled about the past, about Mississippi history. They had been taught total, what we in sociology call BS about the past. That's bad sociology. Okay. And so I finally put together a team of students. I got a grant and put together a team of students and faculty at Tougaloo and at Millsaps, the white school, and we wrote a new history of Mississippi, Mississippi Conflict and Change. And it then became, as Steve mentioned, the subject of a fairly well-known lawsuit, still well-known, called Lowen et al. Versus Turnipseed et al. Okay. I want to give a shout out to, and I actually don't want you to applaud her, I just want you to notice her, if she's in the crowd, to one of the attorneys that worked on that case and is still here today, Barbara Phillips. Are you here? There she is. Well, the reason I want you to see her is because she is now chairing the combined campaigns here at this school for an Ernst Berinsky Memorial Chair and a Mississippi Civil Rights Movement Memorial Chair. And so I want you to see her afterward and tell her how you can, and ask her how you can give money, how you can pitch in, how you can do stuff related to those two, now one, combined campaign, okay? Well, after I left the University of Vermont because I wrote a bestseller, actually, as you all mentioned. There are other sociologists that have done better, but they are dead. And I'm actually working on that myself, but never mind. And so I want to announce, I guess we've never announced it before, but several years ago I started setting up, and this is the public announcement of, a chair in sociology. Okay, that was my department. I chaired the department after I was here for a couple of years. And so it's going to be named for me, the chair, which is appropriate because I'm given the money. Okay? And so it will be the James W. Lowen Chair of Sociology. And I want to say it to you because it's going to be a fully funded chair, which takes about $3 million. That is to say, it's not just a chair that gives you extra stuff if you're that professor. It pays your basic salary. This is basic Tougaloo money. It's fairly easy to, and Steve is a master at it, to get money for special programs like the anti-slavery conference and all kinds of, but Tougaloo has to get money for keeping the electricity on, for teaching the students, for teaching the courses and so on. And one way to do this is through really endowed chairs. So upon my death, maybe even before then, the fund is right now at about $1.5 million. And I want to give a shout out to one other person who I think is here, who has been managing the fund pro bono, without charging me or without charging Tougaloo, and that's Jim Lowen. Would you stand? I thought you were here. He's all the way from Minneapolis. We could run a Minnesota Studies program if we wanted to do that. But anyway, so he's been managing it and putting it in investments that bring in a pretty good return, but are also quite safe. At least he assures me they are, and so far they've proven pretty much to be so. So I wanted to announce that chair, and I wanted to tell you why I did it, or why I'm doing it. And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, before deciding to do this, my wife Susan and I visited the campus. Again, I've stayed in touch, and we were actually put up at the president's residence. It needed some repairs then, so I'm happy that it's getting repaired, and I'm really happy you're going to move in and live on campus. Yeah. For one thing, if students get upset with you, they can picket you right there. And I think that takes guts, and that's where it is, the president's residence after all. But it wasn't being used, and so we were put up there for the weekend. And we ventured over to Warren Hall for breakfast, or maybe it was lunch. I think it was lunch. And we just sat down at a table with a student or two, and I asked them, "Why are you at Tougaloo?" And the answer came back, 2 reasons. Because it's hard. All right? Now, I'm not even sure it is that hard, although I'm going to tell you a true story. When I left and went to the white school, Vermont, I had to water down my course in sociological methods for the white folks. All right? So I was teaching a hard course, and Tougaloo students did all right with it. All right, so because it's hard, and because there's a sense of social justice, and that was exactly the 2 things I wanted to hear. And so I decided, okay, I can continue to support this school, all right? And that was exactly what I heard yesterday morning at the alumni panel that I think you helped chair at 11 o'clock yesterday, that students who graduated in 1995 to 2015 or so think that it was hard and that it was supportive of social justice. So that's good. And the other reason besides that was I know, and I've researched this, that Tougaloo offers more bang for the buck than any other school. Partly because the faculty is so underpaid. But nevertheless, so I'm not encouraging the bad pay. But I am saying, if you, any of you, have money to give, I mean, I give money to my alma mater, Carleton College. I make a gift every year. I'll be open about it. I make a gift of $10 every year because it's important to them that 80% or something like that of their alumni contribute, okay? But Carleton has a huge endowment, especially huge compared to Tougaloo's endowment. They don't need my thousands or my more, so they get my 10. In terms of Harvard Graduate School, where I went. Harvard University has more money than the Pope. There is no institution that needs money less than Harvard University. I had a very good experience there, but I give my money to Tougaloo, and I suggest that you folks do the same thing, whether you're 23 or, like me, 77 or even older. Do the same thing. And I want to submit that if you do, then your money will help Tougaloo long be hard and help Tougaloo long stand for social justice.
I'm signing something. Signing something.
Well, I just signed a form of my last will and testament so that I can't back out from giving you the endowed share.
Thank you so much. Let's give him, Jim, we love you. Susan, would you come up and join us, please? These two people are absolutely a gift to Tougaloo College. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. What an exciting day, what an exciting time, what an exciting event. And I'm so, so very grateful, so very blessed to actually stand in this place at this time to say thank you to all of you who are here, but more importantly to a woman that I've just grown to love this woman, her story, her strength, her tenacity, just the actual love that she has for humanity is overwhelming. When she walked into my office and sat down to tell me her story, I began to cry because I thought, what a sacrifice for all of us, and the pain she endured from the alma mater that she loves so much. I was almost afraid to ask her to come and speak, but when I did, she said yes. And I embraced her then, I embrace her now. Today, she said, should I put on my high heels? I said, they didn't come to see your feet. They came to hear you. And so I also told her, I don't want you up there thinking about your toes are hurting. But I love this lady because she has opened doors for all of us. And I'm here to say thank you. And I told her she's going to help me at Tougaloo. So we have some gifts for you. And I want to say to Jim, I met Jim in July. I met him through email in June. Dr. Hogan was so gracious to say, Jim, I'm leaving, Carmen is coming. Here's her email address. So he was emailing both of us in May and in June. And July, I got to go to his home and meet him and his wife and his son and other friends of his. And I went back to visit him again in DC. I felt like I knew him the moment that I laid eyes on him. He told me wonderful stories about our students and how smart they are and were, and his experience here, how it changed his life in over a very short period. So to give this type of gift to Tougaloo College is life-changing. And I'm excited to be the recipient of this gift on this day, during this time, for these students. Let's give him another hand. So to the rock stars in the room, thank you. Our civil rights members here, those of you who were a part of the movement, we are not worthy of who you are and what you've done. We don't even know what to do these days, and you knew what to do. Not only did you know what to do, but you knew how to do it, and you did it. And we stand by now to eat the fruit of the trees you planted. So thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give them. So many of you know these prints. Tracy Sugarman, he captured images, right, of the reality of the apartheid in the Mississippi Delta that he witnessed and participated in the summer of 1964. He made more than 100 drawings of the summer of arrest, of freedom schools, of courthouses, demonstrations, picket lines, student volunteers, and heroic blacks who opened their homes and their hearts to those who came to this state. Because of Tougaloo's role in the civil rights movement, these drawings became the home of the Tracy Sugarman collection. I'm going to ask for you to come. Attorney Constance Slaughter Harbour, because you are a veteran of the civil rights movement, Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey, as the guest lecturer for the President's Lecture Series, I present to you one of the authentic prints from the Tracy Sugarman, Mississippi 1964 collection. Thank you. She wants to hold it. Come on, take a photo. Come on, take a photo. She doesn't want to let us go, okay? Let's give her another hand. Jim, would you come, please? Because of your magnanimous generosity and for ensuring Tougaloo's future, Dr. James Jim Lowen, I present to you one of the authentic prints from the Tracy Sugarman, Mississippi 1964 collection. Your contributions to Tougaloo College are meaningful and impactful. Thank you for being part of our 150th anniversary, and thank you for being my friend. Oh, picture. I think you got it. I got it.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, please excuse my attire. I was prepared for What's Up Wednesday and festivities today during Founders Week. Everyone, I am Kadriana L. Armstrong, and I am the current chapter president for the Gamma Psi chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I am also the Mississippi State Social Action Collegiate Coordinator for Delta Sigma Theta. So much of what Sora Slaughter Harvey has said today will resonate with me as I plan Delta Days at the nation's capital as well as our state capital. This is something very important for all of us, and we truly thank you. Sora Slaughter Harvey, if you could you please come forward? I know you don't want to let your picture go, but we'll make sure it doesn't leave you. We want to tell you thank you for coming. Thank you for giving us your inspiring words. Thank you for your constant, continuous efforts to make great advances for our sisterhood, for social action and social justice, and also for our beloved Tougaloo College. We thank you so much, and we hope that this small token of love is appreciated and you will forever remember the impact that you have made on the lives of students here at Tougaloo College.
Thank you, Gamma Psi.
Thank you, President Walters. Thank you, Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey. And thank you, Professor Lowen. Before we conclude our program, there are some acknowledgments that we need to make. First, I would like to say thank you for your presence, our board chairman, Dr. Wesley Prater. '11th President of Tougaloo College, Dr. Adib Shakir. Of course, our guest lecturer for this 2019 presidential lecture, class of 1967. And as a representative again of the Tougaloo Nine, Mr. Sam Bradford and Ms. Shirley Bradford. Again, we recognize and acknowledge Dr. James and Susan Lowen, his wife, in the audience here. Thank you all. And also thank you for your attendance, our alumni, faculty, staff, students, and all other special guests and friends of Tougaloo College. And thank you to each of our program participants today for your willingness to be a part of this 2019 presidential lecture. This concludes the 2019 presidential lecture, but it does not end the 150th celebration of Tougaloo College's existence. So if you all would, please join us for a reception afterwards, and there are several other activities that will take place for the remainder of the week. But happy birthday, Tougaloo. And last but not least, a former professor of mine, but somebody very special to this woman here, Professor Dick Johnson, will you please stand? So thank you all for coming, and of course in the overflow room there is a reception to follow. So thank you and have a wonderful Founders Week. The alma mater, I am so sorry. Mr. Evans, please cue us up, sir. Tougaloo Eagle Queen.
To
receive this benediction. Go now in the power, the purpose, and the promise of God to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before your God, for this is the will of God. Go in peace. Greet someone on your way out, and we will see you in the reception.